Most people believe that the ones who suffer the loudest are the ones who need the most help. But some of the deepest pain in a person's life makes almost no sound at all. It settles, it waits, it gets mistaken again and again for peace. Tonight, we look at the ones who never seem to need checking on and why that silence was never proof that they were fine. The obsidian chamber holds its usual stillness, but tonight there is a different weight in the air, the kind that comes before a hard conversation rather than after one.
Abraxas here. There is a kind of person who learns early that their distress is inconvenient to others, and so they train themselves out of showing it, not because they feel less, because they learned that showing it costs them something. Attention, once given generously, that later gets treated as a burden. A parent who needed them to be easy, a sibling whose needs always ranked first. Somewhere in that early arithmetic, they did the math and decided that calm was safer than honest.
Zenox here. This is not a virtue. This is a wound wearing the mask of maturity. People call it strength when someone carries everything without complaint, but strength was never the absence of struggle. It was the presence of struggle handled openly. What we are actually looking at is someone who has been abandoned so many times in their asking that they simply stopped asking, and everyone around them mistook the silence for solved.
The wound is real, but presses further into the mechanism behind it. It is not always abandonment that teaches this. Sometimes it is love, misapplied. A parent who was proud of how little their child needed. A friend group that praised someone for never being dramatic, for never being too much, for always being the steady one. The compliment becomes the trap. The moment someone is rewarded for not needing anything, they quietly stop believing they are allowed to.
There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being useful to everyone and essential to no one's concern. People will come to this person with their crises, their late-night collapses, their unraveling, and they will be met every time with steadiness. And because that steadiness never runs out in front of them, they assume it never runs out at all. They do not see what it costs because the entire performance was built so that the cost would never be visible.
The part that makes it more than sad, the part that makes it urgent. When someone has trained themselves this well, the people around them stop checking, not out of cruelty, out of trust. A misplaced trust, but a real one. They assume no news is good news. They assume the absence of a crisis means the absence of pain. And so the quiet ones become invisible exactly at the moment they need to be seen the most, because their entire skill set was built around not being seen in that way.
A lake can look calm on the surface for years. No storms, no waves, nothing to suggest disturbance. But calm on the surface tells you nothing about what is happening beneath it. Depth is not visible from the shore. You have to actually go in to know what's down there, and most people never do, because the surface gave them no reason to.
That is the danger precisely. We treat surface calm as information about depth when it is only information about surface. A person can be drowning 3 meters down, and the water above them will not so much as ripple. From where we stand, looking in from dry land, everything appears fine, because fine was the only thing we were ever shown.
If you have someone in your life who never asks for anything, who never seems to struggle, who is always the one holding others together, that absence of asking is not proof of absence of need. It might be the loudest signal in the room if you know how to read silence instead of waiting for noise.
What does it cost the person themselves to live this way for years? Something happens to a person who has trained themselves out of asking. The want does not disappear. It goes underground. It waits, sometimes for a decade, sometimes longer, and it does not vanish simply because it stopped being spoken. It accumulates, quietly. The way sediment builds at the bottom of still water, invisible from above, but there, layer by layer, year by year.
Eventually, some of these people break in ways that shock everyone around them, and the shock itself is proof of how well the mask worked. No one saw it coming, they will say, but someone was always drowning. They simply never let anyone see the water rising.
This does not mean the person is broken beyond repair or doomed to this pattern forever. It means the pattern was learned, and what is learned can be unlearned, slowly, with practice, with people who do not need to be asked twice. Someone who checks in without waiting for a crisis. Someone who notices the absence of asking as its own kind of asking, and responds to it anyway.
It is not enough to simply say, "I'm here if you need anything." That phrase has been said to this person 1,000 times, and it changes nothing because the entire architecture of their silence was built around never using an open door. What changes something is specificity. Not, "Are you okay?" but "I noticed you've been quieter than usual, and I'm not going anywhere until we talk about it." The difference between those two approaches is the difference between an unlocked door and someone actually walking through it.
If this describes you, if you are the one who learned to carry things quietly, the calm you show the world was never dishonest. It kept you functioning when functioning was the only option available. But it was never meant to be permanent architecture. It was meant to be scaffolding, useful for a season, not a life sentence.
No one is coming to check the depth of the water unless you give them a reason to look. That is not fair, and it should not be the burden it is, but it is the reality of how most people move through the world, distracted, assuming, reading surfaces, because surfaces are easier than depths. Waiting for someone to notice on their own is a bet you will lose more often than you win.
The two perspectives do not collapse into agreement, but they arrive somewhere adjacent to it. The calm you present to the world may have kept you safe once, and there is no shame in that. But safety and connection are not the same thing, and a life spent entirely on the surface, however calm it looks from the shore, is still a life spent alone in deep water. The people who love you cannot read what you refuse to show them, not because they don't care, because depth was never visible from where they are standing. If you recognized yourself in this tonight, in the version of you that stopped asking, that learned calm as a survival skill rather than a truth, sit with that for a moment before you close this. You do not owe anyone a performance of being fine. And if you know someone like this, someone whose silence you've been reading as peace, this might be the night you ask a harder question than usual. Not "Are you okay?" but "What have you been carrying that no one's checked on in a while?" Tell us in the comments which side of this water you've been standing on, the one performing calm or the one who stopped checking. We'll see you in the next chamber.
Subscribe to join the reflection and welcome to the channel.